Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to jump right into the heart of Islam. We'll be exploring the foundational ideas that guide more than 1 billion people around the globe and really see how this faith is all about building a deep personal connection with the divine.
You know, in a world that's just filled with constant noise and distractions, where do you even begin to look for real guidance? It's a question that people have asked for centuries, and for Muslims, the answer starts with a source that's believed to be clear, direct, and divine.
So, let's start our journey right at the beginning. We're going to explore the very source of religious guidance in Islam. Where does it all come from?
Okay, so the foundational belief here is pretty straightforward. All true guidance comes directly from the Almighty. This divine message was then delivered through a whole series of prophets over time, with the Prophet Muhammad understood to be the final messenger not just for one group, but for all of humanity. So his life and his teachings are really the lens through which this ultimate guidance is seen.
So if that was the final message, how was it preserved? How was it passed down so that anyone could access it? Well, let's take a look at the two core sources that really form the bedrock of the entire faith.
To make sure nothing was lost, the divine message was transmitted in two distinct but totally inseparable forms. You can kind of think of them as two parts of a whole, right? They have to work together to create that complete foundation for the faith.
And here they are, the two main pillars of Islamic guidance. On the left, you've got the Quran, believed to be the literal, unchanged word of God. And on the right, you have the Sunnah, which is essentially the established religious practices of the Prophet himself. Now, what's absolutely crucial here is that both are considered authentic because they were preserved and passed down through the consensus of the entire early community. Okay, so now we know the sources, but what are they actually teaching? What's the real essence of the religion? What's the one core principle that kind of powers everything else?
At the very heart of the faith is one single concept, worship, or in Arabic, ibadah. But this goes way beyond just physical rituals. It's really an internal state of being, a constant, deep awareness of God's attributes that totally shapes your perspective on everything.
And this worship, it always starts inside. It's something that's cultivated in the heart and in the mind. It's about being in a constant state of remembering God, feeling gratitude for what you have, and putting your ultimate trust in Him. It's a very personal, internal connection.
But that internal feeling, it can't just stay inside, right? It has to flow outward. It has to show up in the real world through actual, tangible actions, like prayer, charity, and other acts of devotion. So when you take this whole idea of worship, both the internal state and the external actions, and you structure it with principles and laws, it becomes what the Quran calls deen. And this is more than just religion as we might think of it. It's understood to be a complete, all-encompassing way of life.
Now, this is a really fascinating distinction. This deen is seen as having two main components. First, there's al-Hikmah, or wisdom. Think of this as the universal, unchanging moral core, principles like justice and compassion that are timeless. Then, there's al-Kitab, which is the law. This includes the specific rituals and commands that were tailored for a particular time and a particular community.
So how was all this guidance actually delivered throughout history? Well, let's take a look at the messengers who were tasked with this pretty huge divine mission.
So, the faith makes a really key distinction here. You have prophets and you have messengers. A prophet receives divine revelation to teach and to warn people. A messenger does that too, but they're also given the authority to establish God's law and serve as a final judge for their people. It's a critical role that basically marks a point of no return for those who reject the message.
So with revelation considered complete, who carries that mission of teaching and warning forward today? Well, the responsibility is said to have passed on to the scholars of the community. Their job is to guide people based on the preserved Quran and Sunnah.
This brings us to how all of this guidance is actually applied in a believer's life, and it really comes down to two crucial complementary dimensions. The first dimension is the outward submission to God's will, and the name for this way of life is Islam, which literally means submission. It refers to all the external practices and the general framework of the faith.
And these outward acts of submission, they form the foundational structure of the faith. You've probably heard of them. They're the famous 5 pillars. These are considered the essential, non-negotiable practices that really shape a Muslim's day-to-day life.
But that's only half the story. The second dimension is the inner conviction that gives all those outward acts their meaning. This is called iman, which we translate as faith. It's all about what's going on in the heart.
And just like the outward practices have their pillars, this inner faith is also built on a clear foundation, a set of core beliefs. You can think of these convictions as the internal engine that powers all the external actions of Islam.
So the crucial point here is this incredible synergy. You can't have one without the other. Islam, with its 5 pillars, represents the body, the outward acts, and Iman, with its core beliefs, represents the soul, the inner conviction. Together, they create a single, holistic way of life.
At the end of the day, Islam is presented as this dynamic interplay between belief and action, between what you truly hold in your heart and how you actually live your life in the world. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. How does that balance shape a life of genuine meaning and purpose?